Welcome back, occultists, to another video. Are you afraid of being alone? These stories may be triggering or graphic for some due to the subject matter. If you are new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. The advertisement promised a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a well-paid position as a waitress on a high-end yacht owned by a reclusive millionaire. The allure of good money and the chance to escape the monotony of my previous waiting jobs were irresistible. I was young, desperate for a change, and completely unaware of the horrors that awaited me. The yacht was a floating palace, its decks gleaming under the sun, the interior a testament to opulence and luxury. The owner, Mr. Aldrich, was a man whose wealth was as vast as the ocean we sailed upon, his presence commanding yet enigmatic. From the moment I stepped aboard, I felt the weight of his gaze, assessing, calculating. The guests were an eclectic mix of the wealthy and the influential, their conversations dripping with privilege and entitlement. My job was simple: serve and be invisible. But as the days passed, a sense of unease began to settle over me, a whisper of something sinister beneath the laughter and the clinking of glasses. It started with small, unsettling occurrences. I'd find rooms that weren't on the blueprints, their doors vanishing as soon as I turned my back. Shadows moved in the corner of my vision, shapes that seemed human yet impossibly distorted. The air would sometimes grow cold, a chill that seeped into my bones, leaving me shivering despite the warmth of the tropical sun. But it was the night of Mr. Aldrich's private party when the true horror revealed itself. The invitation was for the elite few, the inner circle of his acquaintances, and I was to serve them exclusively. The atmosphere was charged, a palpable tension that made my skin crawl as I prepared the dining area on the main deck. The guests arrived at midnight, their faces obscured by elaborate masks, a grotesque parody of a masquerade. Mr. Aldrich greeted them with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, his voice a low murmur that sent shivers down my spine. As the night progressed, the party descended into a bacchanal, the guests' behavior becoming increasingly depraved, their appetites for excess unbounded by morality or decency. I tried to focus on my duties, to ignore the scenes unfolding around me, but it was impossible to turn a blind eye. The guests indulged in acts of cruelty and sadism, their laughter echoing across the deck as their victims, brought aboard for their entertainment, cried out in pain and terror. Mr. Aldrich watched it all, a satisfied spectator to the chaos he had orchestrated. The breaking point came when I was summoned to deliver a tray of drinks to the lower deck. The door to the room was ajar, and inside, I witnessed a scene that would haunt me for the rest of my days. Bound to ornate chairs were individuals, their bodies bruised and battered, their eyes pleading for mercy that would not come. Around them stood several guests, their masks now more terrifying than any disguise, as they reveled in the torment they inflicted. I stumbled back, horror clutching in my throat, the tray clattering to the floor. Mr. Aldrich appeared beside me, his hand gripping my arm with a strength that belied his age. "You've seen too much," he whispered, his breath cold against my ear. "But remember, you're here by choice. Your silence has been bought and paid for." I nodded, my voice a mere whisper, understanding the unspoken threat. I was complicit now, a silent witness to the atrocities committed aboard the yacht. The rest of the night passed in a blur, my mind reeling from the horrors I had witnessed, my soul stained with the knowledge of man's capacity for evil. The next morning, the yacht docked at a secluded island, and the guests departed as if nothing had happened, their laughter and farewells a grotesque mask over the darkness of the previous night. Mr. Aldrich handed me an envelope, heavy with cash, a bribe for my silence. "I trust you'll be discreet about what you've witnessed," he said, his gaze piercing. "Consider this payment for your services and your silence." I took the envelope, my hands trembling, and disembarked, the weight of the money in my pocket a constant reminder of my cowardice. I wanted to go to the authorities, to scream the truth from the rooftops, but fear held me back, the fear of Mr. Aldrich's reach and the knowledge that my word against this would amount to nothing. I left the island that day, my dreams of adventure and escape turned into nightmares. The money I had thought would be my salvation became a chain, binding me to the secret I was forced to keep. Night after night, I relived the horrors, the screams of the victims echoing in my dreams, a constant reminder of the night I became a bystander to evil. The yacht sailed on, a beautiful demon cruising the seas, its owner and guests continuing their depraved games, untouched by conscience or remorse. And I, once eager for a glimpse of the world beyond my small existence, found myself longing for the simplicity of my old life, the innocence I had lost forever aboard that cursed vessel. In the end, the opulence and luxury that had once dazzled me revealed themselves for what they truly were: a gilded cage, a facade hiding unspeakable horrors. And I, like so many before me, had been drawn into the darkness, a willing pawn in a game where the stakes were human souls. In the depths of night, working alone can transform even the most mundane office into a sprawling labyrinth of shadows and whispers. I learned this the hard way, during a winter that seemed to claw at the very bones of the city, leaving its inhabitants shivering and its streets deserted. My job as a data analyst, once a refuge from the unpredictability of the outside world, became the stage for a series of events that would forever blur the line between reality and the macabre tapestry of my darkest fears. It began on a night like any other, with the exception of my colleague, Marissa, calling out sick, leaving me to man our department alone. The office, a modern edifice of glass and steel, felt different in her absence, colder, somehow, as if the building itself lamented her absence. I settled into my cubicle, the glow of my dual monitors casting a pale light in the darkness, the only sounds the clicking of my keyboard and the occasional howl of the wind against the windows. At first, the oddities were small enough to dismiss. A feeling of being watched, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end, a chill that seemed to seep into my very marrow despite the warmth of the heating. I told myself it was just the solitude playing tricks on my mind, the human brain's penchant for finding patterns and meaning where there was none. But then, the whispers started. Faint at first, so soft I could convince myself I was imagining them, just the sound of my own blood in my ears. They grew louder, though, more insistent, a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I spun in my chair, scanning the empty office for any sign of life, but there was nothing, only the endless rows of dark, unoccupied cubicles. My heart began to race, panic a bitter taste in my mouth. I tried to focus on my work, to drown out the whispers with the mundane reality of numbers and code, but they persisted, a constant undercurrent beneath the click-clack of my keyboard. That's when I saw it, a shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, moving in the periphery of my vision. I blinked, certain my mind was playing tricks on me, but there it was again, a formless shape that slithered between the cubicles, always just out of direct sight. The air grew colder, the whispers louder, and I knew with a certainty that bordered on madness that I was not alone. Driven by a mix of fear and desperate curiosity, I rose from my chair, my steps hesitant as I ventured into the maze of cubicles. The shadows seemed to retreat before me, leading me deeper into the office, away from the safety of my desk and the pale light of my monitors. The whispers grew coherent, words spoken in a language I couldn't understand, a dialect of fear that needed no translation. My breath formed clouds in the frigid air, and I could see my exhalations swirling around me, as if the very atmosphere of the office had changed. I found myself standing before the break room, the door slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me inside. The shadow slipped through the opening, and the whispers crescendoed into a single, intelligible word, "Come." With a hand that trembled despite my efforts to steady it, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was bathed in an otherworldly light, sourceless and cold, the shadows dancing on the walls like specters at some macabre ball. And there, in the center of the room, stood Marissa. But it was not Marissa as I knew her. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, her eyes hollow pits of darkness that seemed to swallow the light. She whispered my name, her voice a sound that seemed to come from a great distance, a mournful echo that filled the room. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling, unable to reconcile the sight before me with the reality I knew. The door slammed shut behind me, plunging the room into darkness, and her whispers became a wail, a sound of such despair and hopelessness that it threatened to tear my sanity apart. I don't know how long I stood there, trapped in the darkness with that thing that wore Marissa's face. Time lost all meaning, the moments stretching into eternity until, with a suddenness that left me gasping for breath, the light returned. The break room was empty, the shadows gone, the temperature normal. The door, which had been unyielding moments before, swung open at my touch, revealing the office just as I had left it, my monitors casting their pale glow in the darkness. I fled the building that night, the screams of the wind indistinguishable from the wails of my own terror. I never returned, leaving behind not just my job, but a part of my soul, forever entwined with the shadows and whispers of that night. In the days that followed, Marissa returned to work, healthy and whole, with no recollection of the night I saw her doppelganger. No one believed my story, attributing it to stress or a trick of the light. But I know what I saw, what I experienced in the depths of that office building. The whispers still haunt me, a constant reminder of the night when the veil between worlds grew thin, and I came face to face with something that defied explanation. I live in the light now, avoiding the shadows, forever wary of the darkness and the secrets it holds. The office stands empty now, a monument to unspoken horrors, its windows dark, its doors locked. They say it's haunted, cursed by whatever I unleashed that night. I believe them. For I know that beyond the realm of human understanding, there exist things that lurk in the darkness, waiting for the lonely and the unwary, whispering promises of terror and despair. The last thing I remembered before the accident was the sound of my own laughter, filling the car as my friend and I joked about trivial matters. That laughter was abruptly replaced by the screech of tires, the shattering of glass, and then, darkness. When I awoke in the hospital, bandages enveloping my throat and a dull ache pulsating through my body, the reality of my situation slowly crept in. I had survived, but the cost was my voice, stolen by the trauma inflicted upon my vocal cords. The weeks that followed were a silent nightmare, a world where my laughter, my cries, and my words evaporated into nothingness. I communicated through scribbled notes and gestures, a poor substitute for the voice I once took for granted. My friends and family offered smiles of encouragement, but their eyes betrayed their pity. I was trapped in a cage of silence, my every attempt to speak met with frustration and tears. It was during this vulnerable time that the unthinkable happened. I was walking home from a therapy session, lost in the silence of my thoughts, when a hand clamped over my mouth, dragging me into an alley. Panic surged through me, primal and raw, as I fought against my assailant, but without my voice, my screams for help were nothing more than whispers against his hand. The world became a blur of motion and fear as I was pulled into a vehicle and blindfolded. My mind raced with terror, the helplessness of my situation a bitter poison. When the vehicle finally came to a halt, and I was dragged into the cold embrace of a warehouse, the reality of my predicament dawned on me. I was not alone. The faint sound of breathing and the shuffle of movement told me there were others, each trapped in their own silent nightmare. We were commodities, objects to be traded and sold in the shadowy underbelly of society. Our captors were shadows, their features obscured, their voices a cacophony of cruelty and malice. Time lost its meaning in that place, each moment stretching into eternity as we awaited our fate. My mind, once filled with the mundane concerns of daily life, now raced with desperate plans of escape. But how could I, voiceless and weak, hope to flee from my captors? The answer came in the form of another captive, a young girl no older than 16, her eyes bright with the fire of defiance. Through gestures and written words, we forged a bond, a silent pact to fight against the darkness that sought to consume us. The opportunity for escape presented itself in a moment of chaos, a brief lapse in our captor's vigilance. My heart pounding in my chest, I followed the girl's lead, our movements quiet and precise as we navigated the maze of the warehouse. The outside world greeted us with the cold kiss of dawn, the open air a sweet promise of freedom. Our escape was not unnoticed. The sound of pursuit filled the air, a symphony of danger that urged us to run faster, to push beyond the limits of our fear. The city became a labyrinth, its streets and alleys a blur as we sought refuge from the monsters that hunted us. In the end, it was a stranger who offered sanctuary, a kind soul who saw two frightened girls and chose to help. The police were called, our story spilled out in written words and tears, a tale of survival against the odds. My voice may have been stolen by the accident, but in its absence, I found a strength I never knew I possessed. The ordeal in the warehouse, the fear and the desperation, forged a new voice within me, one that did not rely on spoken words to be heard. The girl and I were hailed as survivors, our story a testament to the human spirit's resilience. But as the world moved on, I remained haunted by the shadows of that warehouse, the knowledge that such darkness existed in the corners of our reality. I dedicate my life now to those who are still trapped in their own silent nightmares, their voices waiting to be found. My voice may never return, but I have discovered other ways to scream, to fight against the silence that once threatened to consume me. The night of my escape, the feeling of helplessness that enveloped me, serves as a constant reminder of my journey from darkness into light. I may have lost my ability to speak, but I have found something much more powerful, my will to survive, to fight, and to never be silenced again.